This happened when I was 22, not long after I moved into my first flat. It was a small town in Greater Manchester. Nothing special. A few pubs, a Tesco Express, a row of takeaways and one fish and chip shop that everyone used because it stayed open later than anywhere else. I worked shifts at the time, so I'd often finish late and grab something on the way home. It became part of my routine. Same walk, same order, chips, gravy and a can of Coke. I didn't think anyone would notice something that ordinary, but someone did. The first time I saw him, he was standing across the road from the fish and chip shop underneath the bus shelter. It was raining, and he didn't have an hood up or umbrella. He was just standing there, facing the shops. I remember noticing him because the bus shelter was empty apart from him, and he wasn't looking down the road for a bus. He was looking at the shop, or at least I thought he was. I went in, ordered my food and waited by the counter. There were two young men working behind it and one older customer waiting for his order. Everything felt normal. Then I glanced back through the window. The man was still there. Only now I could tell he was looking directly at me. I looked away straight away. I told myself I was being dramatic. People stare. People are strange sometimes. It was late, I was tired, and I'd probably just made eye contact by accident. When my food was ready, I left the shop and turned towards my flat. It was only a 7-minute walk, but most of it was down a side road with terrace houses on one side and a dark, narrow alley behind the shops on the other. I'd walked it 100 times. That night, I got maybe 20 steps from the fish and chip shop before I heard footsteps behind me. Not close, but there. I didn't turn around at first. I just slowed slightly, pretending to check my phone. The footsteps slowed too. I crossed the road. The footsteps crossed after me. I remember thinking, don't run. If you run, you're telling him you know. So I stopped outside a house and pretended to tie my shoelace. I looked back then. It was him. The man from the bus shelter. He had stopped too, about 10 houses back, standing under a weak orange glow of a street lamp. He wasn't pretending to look at anything. He was just facing me. I got up and walked faster. So did he. At the end of the road, instead of turning left towards my flat, I went right towards the main road, where there were still cars passing. The second I changed direction, he stopped. That sounds like nothing, but it was the way he stopped, like I'd done something he hadn't expected. I went to a corner shop that was still open and stood near the fridges, pretending to choose a drink. The woman behind the counter looked up and asked if I was all right. I said yes. Then she looked past me towards the front window. The man was outside. He didn't come in. He stood near the newspaper stand by the door, close enough that the automatic door kept opening and closing. Open, close, open, close. The woman behind the counter frowned and shouted, "Are you coming in or not?" He didn't answer. He just looked at me through the glass, then he smiled. It wasn't a grin, it was worse than that. It was small, like he knew something I didn't. The woman behind the counter came round and locked the door. She asked me if I knew him. I said no. She told me to stay inside and rang her husband, who lived above the shop. A few minutes later, he came downstairs, opened the door and stepped outside. The man was gone. I waited there for nearly half an hour. The shopkeeper's husband offered to walk me home, but I was embarrassed and said I'd be fine because my flat was close. That was stupid. I took the long way back, sticking to the main road, checking behind me every few seconds. I didn't see him again. When I got to my flat, I locked the door and looked out of my bedroom window. Nothing. The next morning, I almost convinced myself it had just been a strange man trying to scare me. Then I went to leave for work. There was a fish and chip wrapper pushed through my letterbox. At first I thought maybe it had blown in somehow, or someone had dropped rubbish in the hallway, but when I picked it up I recognised it. It was from the same fish and chip shop. Grease-stained paper with the same red logo, the same torn corner where I'd opened it while walking. My own wrapper. The one I had thrown in a public bin on the main road before going into the corner shop. Someone had taken it out of the bin and brought it to my flat. That was the moment I stopped trying to explain it away. I called the police, but there wasn't much they could do. Hadn't been attacked, he hadn't spoken to me. I didn't have a clear photo of him. The officer I spoke to was decent, but I could tell there wasn't enough of them to act on. I stopped going to the fish and chip shop after that. I changed my route home from work. I started taking taxis when I finished late, even though I couldn't really afford it. For a while, nothing else happened. Then about 3 weeks later, I was walking home in the afternoon, broad daylight, busy street, completely normal. As I passed the bus shelter opposite the fish and chip shop, I noticed something taped to the inside of the glass. It was my receipt from the night he followed me, the one that had been stapled to my food bag. I know it was mine because my order on it, chips, gravy, Coke, the time, the date, everything. But there was something written across the bottom in black pen. You went the wrong way. I moved out of the flat 2 months later. I never saw the man again. I never found out how he knew where I lived. Maybe he followed me before that night and I just hadn't noticed. Maybe he saw which building I went into from a distance. Maybe it was pure chance. But that's the part that still bothers me. Because if he already knew where I lived, then the night outside the fish and chip shop wasn't him choosing someone at random. It was him letting me know.